Hey guys, what's happening? Hey, you won't believe the times that the Jokic family just went too far. Nikola Jokic has been getting increasingly vocal during games the past couple of seasons, and this vocality has resulted in a few fights or spats with other players on the court. However, there are times when the Denver Nuggets star center has just gone too far. We'll start this video off with a sequence of events that occurred last season. The Nuggets were able to defeat the Portland Trail Blazers in the first round of the playoffs and advanced on to a series against the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix was clearly the healthier and better team, which is why they shot out to a 3-0 series lead. Now, during Game 4, emotions were clearly high for both sides, as one team could have their season ended while the other could advance to the conference finals. There were about 3 minutes left in the third quarter of regulation when Jokic got into it with a few players on the Suns. Nikola had missed a shot that upset him due to his high standards, and a Suns player came down with the board. That player passed to Payne, who attempted to take the ball up the court. The only problem was that Jokic got upset with his miss and tried to get the ball back, swinging downwards at Payne to knock it loose, but instead just smacking him on the nose. Payne was knocked to the ground after the incident, and immediately Devin Booker ran in to get in the face of Jokic for smacking his teammate. The following 20 minutes of action on the floor were just officials and coaches desperately trying to separate players from both teams. It wasn't an all-out brawl or anything, but arguments were bursting out all over the place, and you could tell the tension was apparent throughout the entire stadium. The referees took a look at the replay and decided that Jokic had the full trio of wind-up, impact, and follow-through on the smack, so he was promptly ejected from the rest of the game as the Nuggets went on to lose and have their season come to a rather unfortunate end. Booker was also handed a technical foul, but he stayed in the game. Now, had Jokic just ran back down to the other end of the floor to play defense, chances are that nobody would have gotten hurt and the game would have finished about a half hour earlier than it actually did. And this video isn't just about Jokic though, his brothers have been close to going over the line too. In regards to this exact same clip, his two brothers happened to be in the stands, actually pretty close to the floor. When Jokic was fighting and arguing with other players like Booker, other fans recorded Jokic's brothers to see how they felt. The videos were them yelling and screaming down the court, and by the looks of it, they were seconds away from jumping onto the court themselves and starting a brawl in order to defend their brother. Luckily, they chose not to get involved, but the NBA world quickly realized that these dudes weren't to be messed with, which is why people have paid a little more attention to them now whenever they attend Jokic's games. This next incident happened this season and was the most recent one. It's very easy for players to get frustrated at the officials or the other team when they feel like they're getting fouled and it's not being called. And that was precisely what was happening during this contest between the Nuggets and the Miami Heat. It was just a few weeks ago at the beginning of the regular season, Jokic was coming back down the court to play defense when the Miami Heat forward Markieff Morris ran over and slammed into the side of Jokic. From one angle of the video, it's unclear why Morris even body-checked Jokic in the first place. It was probably frustration boiling over for both of these guys. But regardless of the reason, Jokic didn't really get affected by it at all too much, though he definitely felt it. The officials didn't blow a whistle on the hit, so Jokic took the game into his own hands and ran at Morris, shoulder-checking him right in the spine and knocking him straight to the ground. I tell you what, Jokic might have found out that Markieff isn't subscribed to our channel. I would go ahead and subscribe before Jokic comes flying around the corner and gives you a shoulder check. But back to our story now. Instantly, other players and coaches ran over to split the two men up. After the dust started to slow down, we could tell that Morris actually got injured on the hit. You never want to ram into somebody's spine like what Jokic did, even if what he did was a little justified. Morris had to lay on the ground for quite a while, but did eventually get up under his own power and walk off. He thankfully avoided any serious injury, but the hit was definitely unnecessary from both parties. As passionate as you might be about the game, there are times when you've just got to turn it down a notch, and this was one of those times. All the while Morris was being helped to his feet, Jokic got an earful from other Miami players who were sticking up for their teammate. I'm not exactly sure how many players were hoping to get in on the action, but I do know that Jimmy Butler was involved, and Butler was seen saying, "Bring yo ass to the back," multiple times to Jokic before any ruling was made by the referees. Yet again, it was lucky that these teams didn't take up the offer and start throwing haymakers back in the locker rooms. I should mention that a few members of Miami were seen in the back. By the looks of it, they were hoping to confront Jokic, but nobody from Denver attempted to make any contact, and those guys eventually just walked back to their own tunnel peacefully. Now, I'm not 100% sure on this, but there may have even been a picture floating around online which saw multiple Heat players peering down a tunnel trying to confront Jokic. Might be worth checking out if you have the time. Anyways, let's get back to the game. The referees looked over the incident, and once again, Jokic was ejected for his actions, with the Nuggets holding on to win the ball game in the end. Morris was also ejected for his actions, even though he was hurt, and I think rightfully so because they were both equally to blame in this scenario. On top of the ejection, fines were also given to both players. And of course, after the game, you just knew that the Jokic brothers couldn't sit still and stay out of this one. They had to get their statements made public as well to know that they meant business. Markieff Morris's brother Marcus had taken to Twitter the day after to share his thoughts on the fight, and that was what sparked the argument with the Jokic brothers. His brothers said, "You should leave this the way it is instead of publicly threatening our brother. Your brother made a dirty play first. If you want to make a step further, be sure we will be waiting for you." Now, I don't know about you guys, but this sounds like a threat. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't want to be fighting them though. From the stories I've heard, these guys are ruthless. A report stated that one brother had apparently thrown knives at Nikola when he refused to climb a tree as a kid when they were at a picnic. If this doesn't show you that they mean business, I don't know what does. Now, adding on to this story, the Nuggets and the Heat played again recently as of making this video. There wasn't any confrontation or fight that broke loose, but the Jokic brothers were seated directly behind the Nuggets bench in case anything was to happen during the game between their brother and any Heat player. Of course, nothing ended up happening and the Nuggets wound up winning that game in the end. Afterwards, videos started to go viral with the Jokic brothers being caught partying after the win in Miami and having a grand old time celebrating that victory. It wasn't nearly as good a time for the Heat side though. On top of the loss, they had to prepare for the worst. One report mentioned that Miami brought extra security for their bench and locker rooms to prepare for that upcoming game. This whole situation was without a doubt a time when the Jokic family went way too far and could have avoided all this had he just not retaliated in that moment. Next up, we've got a scuffle that was started by Nikola Jokic right in the middle of yet another playoff series. This one came a couple years ago when they were eliminated in the second round by the Portland Trail Blazers after a rough 7-game series. Jokic was clearly getting upset with the Blazers center at the time, Enes Kanter. It also probably didn't help that his team was losing and he wasn't making any shots, so frustration had to boil over at some point. And that was exactly what happened when Damian Lillard was shooting a free throw. Instead of boxing out for the ball, Jokic took both of his arms and full-out shoved Kanter backwards and almost sent him crashing to the ground. Ironically, Kanter happened to slam right into Jokic's teammate Torrey Craig due to the shove, and Craig was knocked hard onto the ground, and to make matters worse for him, he had already suffered a broken nose and was playing with a mask on. Had Jokic not pushed Kanter, he could have saved his teammate a lot of unnecessary pain. After Craig got up off the ground, a scuffle did break loose because Denver players thought that Kanter hit their teammate on purpose. Jokic got involved in the arguments too, seemingly unaware of the fact that he had started this entire thing by shoving him backwards. It was a moment that shouldn't have happened, but again, Jokic went too far and caused it. Maybe he didn't know that he had caused Kanter to crash into Craig, but escalating the matter definitely didn't help in this case whatsoever. Finally, we've got a clip that Jokic wasn't the cause of, but he still went a little too far anyways. During a game between the Nuggets and the Jazz a couple years ago, Jay Crowder and another Jazz player got into it with Mason Plumlee. Jokic wasn't on the court at the time, and by the looks of it, he may have been inactive for the contest entirely. Nevertheless, he was on the bench. Plumlee and whoever else he was mad at started screaming and shoving one another, causing a big pileup right underneath the basket. Now, as coaches and refs tried to sort everything out, Jokic did the one thing that players are instructed not to do in these circumstances, and he ran out onto the court. He got right in the middle of the scuffle and shoved people around while trying to defend his teammate. It didn't really look like a big deal at first because he practically got lost in the pile, but later on it was announced that the NBA looked back and suspended him for their next game for leaving the bench. Now, Don't get me wrong, I'm all for defending your teammates in situations like this, but Jokic has got to know better in these circumstances. He just took it too far by running out there and getting involved in a fight that wasn't that physical when compared to other huge dust-ups in NBA history. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to watch Nikola Jokic's 6 greatest career fights and altercations next, or YouTube thinks the video on the left might be more your style. So which one's it gonna be, YouTube's choice or mine?